I'm gonna try 3 different free programs to create the thumbnail of this video. Let's see how that goes. Alright, let's go. New project. This is convenient. Do we have a color fill layer? I remember that from Photoshop. I can make it a different color later. Let's bring in some images first and foremost. Let's put Photoshop behind bars. Control T. Okay, it did not override my browser default. This holds control for me, I assume. This works. Oh, no, I just want to resize it. Transform controls. Okay. No, hold Alt. Make it smaller. Move it over here. But I want it to still be clear that it's Photoshop, so let's resize this. Maybe I need a different image. Maybe this. All right. Maybe if I stretch this out, now you can easily see Photoshop and you can see that it's behind bars. And I can obviously add a layer mask. B is brush tool as it used to be in Photoshop. If I hold Alt and drag, ooh, that is nice. And I can drag up and down to change the hardness of the brush. It seems like they really copied Photoshop 1-to-1. So if I hit D, I get the default colors over here, which is black and white. And if I hit X, okay, they copied a lot of things, and that's good. I'm not complaining. I love this. Let's make the jail a little bit nicer. Now let's place these icons right over here. All right, let's take these guys, and I remember Control G groups them up and it works here. What if I want to add an effect? I can double click like I used to double click in Photoshop. They really copied a lot of the very convenient stuff that helps with muscle memory. I think that's really lovely. Let's play with the values a little bit, make it look decent. And now let's change the background, make a brush that's really big and really soft. And if I paint around, okay, that's a little too close. And actually, I remember I used to create the vignette a little bit differently. I used to create a color fill layer that's completely black. And with black, I would just paint in the middle. There you go. Make it slightly darker. Now, if I want to add this effect and copy it to the Photoshop icon, can I hold Alt and drag it over? No, that's not a thing apparently, although it used to be in Photoshop if I remember correctly. That's okay. I can just double click, give it the same effect, and okay, there you go. Now, the jail bars are a little bit too bright in my opinion. What if I add a brightness/contrast, and if I hold Alt and I click this layer, this should only apply to the layer beneath it, which is the bars. And let's make them a little less bright. Now, I'm not really an expert at creating thumbnails just yet, but it seems like the functionality that I need is inside of here for the most part. Let's export this, export as PNG, and save that. Photopea is basically Photoshop in a browser. The workflow feels really familiar, so if you've used Photoshop before, it's easy to jump into it. I didn't test super advanced features though, because for YouTube thumbnails, I don't really need them. But overall, it worked really well. The only downside is that being browser-based is a little less convenient than a desktop app. Alright, let's now try Krita. New image. YouTube thumbnail option is not present, it doesn't seem like. That's okay, because I bet there's a way to save particular configurations and be able to select them later on. Save image size as YouTube thumbnail. Now it should be here. There it is. All right. I can create a fill layer. I don't know what I did over here. Delete all these extra layers. Why can't I delete that? Backspace? No. There has to be a keyboard shortcut. Keyboard shortcuts. Remove layer. Let's make it Shift+D. How about that? Select this. Shift+D. Now, how do I change the color of a color fill layer? Let's try to recreate this. So let's bring in all the images that I need. They are way too big. Control T to transform. No, wait. Control T. There was something. Transform a layer or a selection. Control T. Transform this layer. It wasn't visible at first, but it was actually working. Let's make it smaller. That squishes it. But if I hold Shift, it keeps the dimension. What about Shift and Alt? Alt keeps it centered and Shift keeps the dimensions. And why does Shift plus Alt not let me resize it? That's a little weird. Let's take these guys, stretch them out a little bit to make sure that our Photoshop logo remains clearly visible. One thing I'm noticing is that it doesn't snap to the middle. Shift plus S. Snap to, intersection. I think it's snapping here a little bit, but for some reason, moving this around is a little bit laggy, as you can see. So I can't even really tell if it's really snapping. Let's add a layer mask. Add transparency mask. And if within the transparency mask, I draw. Okay, so if I hit X, it seems to switch between the colors over here. That's very useful. And if I draw in black, the transparency mask works as expected. And if I hold Alt, it doesn't seem like I can resize the brush that way. But if I hold Control, nope, that's okay. I can always use this slider. I don't know what I just did. I was trying to shift click these two layers together. Well, oh, what? So I can bring it back. That's kind of weird. Now the fill layer, it doesn't seem like it can change the color of it. Let's use it as the vignette with a layer mask. How do I change the brush hardness? I can change the fade, but I can't change that from out here, it seems. That's not too convenient. And I can't go above 1000 pixels here. So you know what? Let's create a new layer. Just paint around the edges. Now let's create a paint layer. Make it a dark, desaturated blue. Now, can I add a filter to the bars like I did before to make them slightly darker? Add filter layer. It doesn't seem like there's a brightness filter, but I can make the highlights a little darker. I would like to create a clipping mask. I think that's what it was called in Photoshop. Krita does not have clipping masks like Photoshop. Instead, it uses group layers that composite separately from the rest of the stack. So what the hell just happened? The same thing from before just happened again. I can't even undo it. I still have enough bars, but I don't think I'm gonna have enough bars anymore if this happens again. So if I shift click these guys and group them, the filter only applies to things within the group. That's actually very handy. That might even be a little more convenient than clipping masks. Alright, now let's emboss these guys like I did in the last thumbnail. Layer style, bevel, and emboss. Krita just crashed on me. We have an autosave. I finished the embossing part of the thumbnail. That's it for Krita. Krita feels more focused on digital art than graphic design or thumbnails specifically. It still does the job, and if you really know the software, you can probably make really great thumbnails with it, but coming from Photoshop, it felt a little less intuitive and had more friction than Photopea. And now for the one that's probably the most different from what I'm used to, Gimp. Welcome to Gimp. Create new image, 1280 by 720, and okay. Let's create a layer. B is probably brush tool. Nope. The paint brush tool is P, and I can change the size of it by holding Alt and dragging, but it doesn't seem like I can change the hardness by holding Alt and dragging up and down. Let's drag in the resources that I need. Let's start by resizing the Photoshop icon. Control T maybe? No, the defaults are very different here. Shift plus T is the unified transform tool, and if I hold Alt, nope. If I hold Shift, nope. Wait, oh, I get it. If I grab it by this little corner, I change the corner. But if I grab it by the outer box on the corner, I can now resize the image itself. That's actually quite handy, and I think that makes sense. Now, how do I add a layer mask? Add masks. It's a little mask icon. Let's now add the vignette. Now let's try to group these guys up. Control G. Control G does not do what I thought it would. Create a new layer group. It creates a new group for each selected layer. That is interesting. And now I want to add some embossing effect to it. Filters, light and shadow, bevel. This might be what I'm looking for, just not really the correct setting. I don't think this is it. Distort. Oh, emboss. Literally right there. Well, this is as close as I can get it. I ended up using the bevel filter. I'm sure if I had more knowledge, I'd be able to do a little better. And that's it for Gimp for now. Gimp felt very different from Photoshop, and because of that, it was the hardest for me to get comfortable with quickly. I'm sure it's powerful if you really learn it, but from my perspective, it had the most friction and felt the least convenient to use. So, final verdict, my favorite is Photopea.